And hello, everyone. Welcome to the Riley Lewis Show. I am your host, obviously, Riley Lewis. Joining me tonight, Mr. Antonio Giusto for some election talk. That's right, because the election is just around the corner. You might be thinking about the Rona still, but just around the corner, a few months away, we have a national election, and the stakes have never been higher. I mean, the T-bones, the ribeyes, the stakes have never been higher. So,
don't forget the cheese and eggs and Welch is great.
exactly. So in honor of, I guess really America would be a cheesesteak because Philadelphia. So in honor of that, we're having some election talk and some model talk. So joining me again, Mr. Antonio Giusto. Say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody, and I'm really looking forward to tonight's episode in particular because over the course of the past couple days, I made myself an electoral college prediction map, and when I showed it to Riley, we thought it'd be a great thing to talk about. So now we get to share it with you, the valuable viewers.
We do, and that's the best part. We get to share it with you guys. So let's get to the sharing. So I'm going to switch officially to streaming mode. Bye-bye, everybody. I'm still going to be here, but I'm going to be sharing my screen so that we can actually tune into this map. Be great if the screen would share. Interesting. Maybe we have to go out of... Oh, there we go. Okay. It's all going to be on camera. I don't mind. Okay. All right, everybody. We've got the map up. We've got me, your host, Riley Lewis, and we have Mr. Antonio Giusto. So, Antonio, you start wherever you want to start.
So we're going to be doing this in alphabetical order, starting from Alabama all the way down to Wyoming. So each of these states that you see here are based on a few variables. I did it based on past election cycles, specifically midterms in 2016. How each state handled C-19, the gubernatorial patterns, or more simply phrased, how each election map, how each county is in terms of its color density relative to each election, and how the protests and riots have been handled along with how the government has handled it, because each state, you will hear soon, has handled it in varying ways.
Before you start, before you get into each state and we start explaining what's going on in each state here, I want you to just in a couple of sentences describe what this map is for people and why we find it interesting. And then also I would love to hear what some of your priorities are and what you think are going to be priorities for the American voters in November.
So starting off with priorities for the American voter, I think probably now more than ever is going to be law and order, because even to this day we are seeing unprecedented riots, and quite frankly that needs to stop.
I have family members who lived through the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, and they've seen everything from Martin Luther King to Rodney King get beat, right, and to the OJ trial, and they've told me that this is in many ways a uniquely disastrous time. We are truly living, in some ways, in a disastrous time. I just have to emphasize that for sure, because we are seeing unprecedented levels of civil upheaval that is, in some ways, either quasi-violent or directly violent. And we can't build a democracy on the idea of perpetual destruction. So it really is, it's just not sustainable. Anyway, that said, so this is a map basically for you of how you think states are going to vote this November. That's right?
Yes, I believe the electoral college map is going to look pretty close to this.
So I have a few questions already do you mind if I ask a few questions off the bat before you get into your alphabetical?
Sure.
So I'm curious about your pick for Pennsylvania. I'm also curious about your pick for Ohio.
Okay, so Ohio in particular, I made it that way because, how do I say it? If you go and look at the 2016 and 2018 election maps, they're pretty much identical. But then on top of that, I believe this is also going to be in a reply to how the riots have been handled, specifically the Christopher Columbus statue that was torn down in Columbus, Ohio.
Right.
I think that the reason that Ohio is going to be the way it is because, as of right now, the Trump administration is in every way the antithesis to all the rioting that's been happening.
Right.
And but having said that, the reason it's not any darker is because the Democrat population is also going to turn out in droves.
Okay. Well, what makes you think that? Do you think that's
because
because people are feeling like, oh, they're motivated by the masks, and they're feeling like they're motivated maybe because I feel like a lot of people are discouraged right now. Maybe I'm
to vote,
mistaken, but I feel like a lot of Democrats right now feel like I wanted Bernie and he got screwed twice. So for those people, at least, maybe they're not going to vote, but maybe the rest of. I mean, do you think people are going to? I guess here's a better question. Do you think people are more so turning out because they want to turn out for Joe Biden, or do you predict more people will turn out because they just don't like Trump and they want to vote
that
for someone else?
they just don't like Trump and they want somebody else in there. And
That's
at
fair.
this point, people
I mean, that's an
most
honest
likely.
reason, by the way. I mean, I'm not belittling people's quandaries with the president, but I've heard many people, many friends of mine, just they say they want someone else in, and so they'll vote for literally anyone else. That's a real thing. I think that's fair to point out. So tell me, let's see, maybe explain to me also why Arizona isn't more red, in your opinion.
Well, Arizona has recently become a purple state. I have a few theories to that. I think one could potentially be the Californians moving there,
What else?
and
What are the other ones?
it's a hub for illegal immigration. It's right on the
Okay.
border of Mexico.
But
Yuma.
they also have just to sort of push back a little bit. They also have some counties like where they had Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who was very well known for not being pro illegal immigration. So I'm just wondering, do you think that is changing like internally or?
Well, based on what I've seen so far with the election maps and in forums I'm on for all these different states,
I see. Okay.
it's beginning to get the same layout that virtually every other state is like, where the cities are leaning liberal, but the surrounding areas are leaning
I
conservative.
mean, this is something you have mentioned, but Kristen Sinema, for example, winning
Yeah,
in Arizona. That's an example, right? We're sort of.
yeah, that's an example of. It's a combination of Democrats coming out to vote for midterms and Trump supporters mainly coming out just on the basis of his name. I believe that's how Kristen Sinema won in 2018 because, what is it? The Maricopa County in Arizona, that's
Yeah.
60% of all elections. All election votes out there is Maricopa County, and I believe Phoenix is in that area.
Okay.
And while Phoenix itself is starting to lean liberal, the surrounding areas are very, very conservative. And I think that's what's going to carry it for Arizona in particular. If it weren't for the population shifts, the demographic shifts in the cities, like in Tucson and Phoenix that we're starting to see, I think it would be deep red.
It's going on what's going on in Tucson?
From what I've seen on videos of people who have been there, that's kind of another area where Democrats tend to congregate. But I'm not entirely versed on that for sure. I just know that Phoenix is starting to get a lot of people coming in, lots of job growth, cost of living is going up, and with that is going to come liberal voters.
Interesting. So now let's get to your map more broadly. If you'd like to start from the top, just going through the alphabet. We don't, eventually, if it turns out being really long, we don't have to go through every state, but I'd like to go through most states here. Certainly the swing ones and the ones that aren't super duper strong in either direction. So again, I want you to take the lead on this one. Start wherever you'd like to start.
Sure thing. So we're going to be doing this alphabetically. We kind of covered Arizona already. I might go over it a little bit more as we go down the list, but we kind of covered the gist of it just now. So starting off with Alabama, I made that deep red. And what you're going to hear throughout this is that I'm going to be saying default Republican and default Democrat a lot.
Okay.
I use that to describe people who may not watch the news too much, but they go to the polls and they'll either vote D down the line or they'll vote R down the line.
They're reliably going to vote for the party. Right. Exactly.
Exactly. So with a lot of these states, especially in the South, I'm going to be saying by default a lot.
Okay.
But there are variables as well. But for much of these, it's going to be by default.
Okay.
So Alabama is one such state, especially because there is an election between Jeff Sessions and Tommy Tuberville coming up.
Right.
This year. And on top of that, looking through various websites, I just don't see any Democrat elections coming up there.
Okay.
And on top of that, there's also, as of right now, only 6,700 C-19 hospitalizations, which is unfortunate, but relative to the population as a whole, isn't anything crazy.
Okay.
And even looking further into it, I've seen articles where there was a $100 million small business grant program called Revive Alabama. And this is one such place where it's not only going to just vote red by default, but because the South, they see Trump as kind of the antithesis to all that we're seeing in the media right now.
Right.
I think a lot of people, even in the coastal states who might be Republican and just not be open about it, I think they might be feeling the same way too.
That's fair. I mean, that's fair. So that covers Alabama. I think I would probably agree with all of that. Very, very insightful stuff. I actually did not know about Revive Alabama, but that's very interesting. So that takes us to Alaska now. So
Yeah.
Alaska, that's an interesting pick for Alaska. Do you wanna explore that?
So Alaska has a lot of state election races coming up from what I've seen.
Okay.
They have easily close to 20 different districts.
Whoa.
And in both the House and the Senate, it's pretty much evenly distributed between Democrats and Republicans.
Interesting.
And I think not only will Alaska also vote by default Republican, but also because they kind of like how the economy was before everything was closed down completely. I think a lot of people are going to remember that this November as well.
Has Alaska historically been a default Republican state?
I believe it has.
Interesting. I mean, you did, but so explain to me this then. Why is it not deep red? Is it because there is some Democratic presence?
Yes, there are a lot of Democrat politicians that are going for the House and some in the Senate, but mostly the House. So
Okay.
that's why I'm lighter red, because over time I think we're going to see a bit more Democrat influence in Alaska, but not enough to where it'll flip it like some of the other states we're going to mention.
Okay. Well, next would be Arizona, but I think we covered it. Let's move to Arkansas. So what's up in Arkansas?
So Arkansas, to start off, that's where Tom Cotton is from. That should tell you all you know.
Interesting.
Vote.
Yeah,
The
interesting.
man,
Okay.
the legend, Tom Cotton. That should tell you right there how they're going to vote. And also on top of that, out there, the riots are getting a lot of backlash. You look at any video out there, you'll have some just random passerby screaming at the rioters. It's just not going well out there.
Whoa. Wow. Okay.
So I would say this is the epitome of a default Republican state, and because they have Tom Cotton, he's one of my favorite guys ever. This is, unless they all just got up and switched locations with California, Alabama, I don't think is going to be anything outside of deep red.
Okay. Wow. That's very interesting. We'll see. I mean, I think you're likely right. And I think the reasons that you provided make a lot of sense. And I would love to hear what the viewers think. You guys can always leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let us know how we're doing. But that said, we obviously don't have any states that start with a B. So that brings us to California. California, the big one with all the electoral college votes, right? So let's talk about California.
I got a lot to say about this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry to hijack this one a little bit, but let's talk about the COVID response in California. And I'm sure you heard about Newsom's Winery. We discussed about this a little bit, so maybe you'd like to explain that to people?
So, to briefly summarize it, he closed down all wineries, but his stayed open. Completely open, not to where it couldn't be indoors, only outdoors. No, his was completely open.
They were taking reservations.
Yeah, taking reservations.
On the 4th of July.
On the 4th of July. So, for those of you who are paying attention to how California is handling this, it is among the worst responses in the entire country, but we have a few others that take the spot better. And
New York, maybe?
Oh man, we're gonna get to New York soon.
Okay, we will get there, my friend.
I have a lot to say about New York too. Sorry, I'm just really
we'll
really
get there. We will get there. So clearly, not all of California was responding the same way. I live in a different part of the state than you do, and our counties responded very, very, very differently. So I don't want to, like oust you. So you're from the Bay Area. I'm from Southern California, but not LA. So we had very different responses. So I think we could, maybe if you would like to talk about what you saw in your own, in San Francisco, and then also maybe talk about what you saw in LA, because I think it was very, very bad in LA.
So starting off in LA, one of the driving factors to any virus is having a bad environment, having a poor immune system. That's with any virus. In LA, they now have typhus and the bubonic plague back because they're so filthy.
Wow.
And on top of that,
Hey, just out of curiosity, could you cite a source for our listeners, just if they're curious as well? Because that's important.
Sure, I'll pull that up right now. Let's
Sure.
see.
Okay.
Los Angeles typhus return. Um, let's see. Okay, so how do you want me to do this? You want me to link it to you, or?
No. Go ahead and just tell people the name of the website or whatever, so that
So
people
this is on
can know where to find it.
NBC News. This
Where?
was on NBC
Okay.
News. This one.
Okay.
I'll admit this was a while back, and at the time it just had just surpassed 100 patients, and it was primarily due to the high rat population and all the garbage laying around and the fleas carrying it.
Oh wow.
That's how it started out, and
Oh goodness. Wow.
um, and on top of that, the homeless as well. They are in a subpar environment, are potentially malnourished, not in
Right.
optimal health, are much more susceptible to it. And on top of that, the mayor, Eric Garcetti, I believe his name is, he kept everything perpetually closed down. Even right now in LA, their measures are the same as when all this first started. Nothing has changed there. He even went so far as to say that we're not going to reopen until there is a vaccine available. So, in response, a lot of people in LA they did not like that whatsoever. A lot of them actually did start moving to Arizona because Arizona is, as of right now, a very, very popular spot for people to kind of flee their poorly managed states. I
Really.
think that's partially why it's not a deep red and it's now a swing state.
Wow. I mean that
And
is wow. That's just fascinating. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. So I mean, and we talk about the response now a little bit in the Bay Area.
so San Francisco was much of the same, but in San Francisco itself, as of right now, there are, I believe, only 50 deaths total in a city of almost 900,000.
Wow.
Um, big tech is starting to leave here. All the big tech buildings are going to be emptied out because now everybody here works remotely. To this day, there is still a stay-at-home order. Thank God I don't live in San Francisco itself. Um, and now, on top of that, with George Floyd having unfortunately passed away, now Mayor London Breed is cutting $150 million from the SFPD,
Yeah. I mean, let's
which is
talk about that. By the way, let's super talk about that. So obviously, anyone who watches the tape knows that it's egregious. There's like no way to defend, in my opinion, not up to 9 minutes when there's that. The tape is very damning, and I don't think a lawyer could successfully defend it in a courtroom before a jury. But if you want to live in a safer world with more justice, I don't see how defunding law enforcement can get us there. And I had a friend say something the other day where this person said to me, if I'm having something in my house, I don't need the police to come. And I said to my friend, what about all the people that are being abused by their spouses violently? Like, what about all those times where someone is at home and the drunk husband comes in and starts smacking people around? You call the police because you're in physical danger. So I just think that ironically, the solution requires much more police funding and much more training, but that's just another episode all on its own.
and on top of that, in San Francisco as well, mugshots have been removed from the
Well,
arrest website.
wouldn't you think you want police on the streets trying to help people? I don't know.
Yeah, apparently the San Francisco limousine liberals don't seem to think that's the case. They seem to think that the solution to stopping crime is by taking away the people stopping the crime.
Right.
And
Right.
on top of that, mugshots are now being removed from the SFPD website. And on top of that, they're no longer allowed to respond to nonviolent calls. So if there is a homeless guy in front of your house, if there is a domestic disturbance, maybe disorderly conduct, they're not going to respond to that anymore.
Wow.
It's
Really?
just, and on top of that, the district attorney of San Francisco, to my knowledge, he's about to pass a law where if you're pulled over by a police officer, you could personally sue the officer, not the department, the officer, for any reason.
Wow.
So, understandably, for anyone who knows anything about California, knows that since 2010, maybe even sooner, there has been what is known as a California exodus. There are people going to Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Colorado, Utah, Texas, Florida, Virginia, New York, just all these different areas for cheaper living and better jobs. And from 2010 to 2018, I believe it was about 500,000. Just this last year was 691,000. And I would not be surprised if after this it will be surpassing 1 million from 2020 onward. I believe that, the golden goose that is the California economy is starting to crumble a little, and people are responding accordingly by ensuring that they can save themselves while they still can.
Well, absolutely.
And,
I mean, this has been a disaster for many people. This has been the worst economic crisis of their whole life. This has been disastrous.
And don't mean to brag, I will very soon be among them. I will be in a discreet area where I can get a patch of land and just work and start a family, basically.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, that's fair. Okay, so a lot about California. Let's move on now. Colorado.
Colorado, that's going to be deep blue for one reason, and that is the city density. We have a lot of millennials, a lot of big tech transplants, and colleges in Denver, and that is starting to shift the dynamic entirely. Denver is starting to become known as mini LA, and on top of that, it's starting to spread outward to Aurora, Boulder, and the Springs. And even now, with C-19, Colorado has some pretty strict laws, one being that you could face, I think, a year in prison if you're a repeat offender of not wearing a mask out in public.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, and as of right now, as at the time of this recording, Colorado has about 35,000 cases and only 1,500 deaths. So I think it's a little.
It's also interesting because Colorado opened the same week that Georgia did, but when you look in the news, you only find coverage about increased cases in Georgia. You don't hear anything about the fact that Colorado also opened the same week that Georgia did. It wasn't just there's this myth, I think, that only red states opened. And now they're all paying the price, even though tens of thousands of us were just in the streets, shoulder to shoulder, which is an interesting absence of self-awareness, in my opinion. That said,
exactly.
I think that we could probably skip over Connecticut unless you could say it really, really quickly, and then I want to move on to Delaware because that's obviously Joe Biden's home state.
I seem to have lost you for a second, Riley. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. You got me?
You there?
You got me? You got me? I'm here.
We seem to be having some technical difficulties. Excuse me a second.
I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, there you are. There you are.
Am I back? Okay. Yo, okay. And,
there we are.
Okay. And 3, 2, 1, and we're back. Okay. So I think that we can basically skip over Connecticut. Let's go to Delaware, Joe Biden's home state.
Okay, so first off, it's going to be deep blue. Without question, it's going to Biden. It's his home state. I mean, come on, let's be serious. It's his home state.
Right. I mean, that's fair.
There's not much to say about Delaware, just that they have less than 1,000 deaths and only about 12,000 positive cases, and it's going to go to Biden. It's his home state.
Right, that's easy.
And also it appeals to the Northeast as a whole as kind of a relic of a past time, essentially.
That's fair. Let's talk about Florida. Florida is light red, not deep red. Yeah, so what's going on in Florida?
Well, Florida is a swing state. They have a liberal southern region and a conservative northern region. I think the way that the C-19 scare has been handled is going to kind of hurt the Republicans a little bit. But having said that, I think it's going to be a light red because a bit of an anecdote here. I know a guy who was originally from Pensacola. He said that Trump won Florida decidedly because he went to the areas that they never traditionally voted. And he went to Pensacola on 4 different occasions, and he got everyone out in all those traditional rural counties that never voted to come vote for him.
He did the same in West Virginia in 2016. Went to West Virginia 4 times in 1 month.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's going to be the same thing here with Florida, that he's going to get the northern region out there again, and it's going to be, I think, as of right now, the same as 2016.
So, describe what you think is going on in the southern region, where there's more of a liberal influence, because to my understanding, there are also lots of Cubans that live down there that are not fond of Castro or that sort of politic, and there's a fair amount of Cuban conservatives down there.
Well, the thing with Cubans and supporting Trump is that a lot of them have family who did come here through by makeshift boat through Castro's Cuba, and they saw firsthand what socialism does lead to. And I believe that the current crop of Democrats are kind of leaning in that direction pretty swiftly. And I think that a lot of the Floridian Cubans are starting to see kind of a repeat of what happened to their families.
I mean,
And I think that's why.
do you think Florida is going to likely start to trend closer to a deeper red again, or do you think that Democrats will be able to gain traction?
I think it's going to remain a swing state because the incompetence of the New York government, which we'll get to soon, has caused a lot of New Yorkers to start moving out there, and they don't really have the awareness in that their voting habits brought them what happens to their state. Right. So that's going to bring the dynamic of Florida to a blue direction, and at the same time, the liberal southern region, it's like with every state, the population dense areas tend to think alike, and cities are population dense.
That's fair. So, I was thinking, instead of discussing the entire South, actually, I was thinking about changing this a little bit on the fly. Okay. Instead of going state by state, let's talk about some regions now. So, let's talk about what's going on in Louisiana, Mississippi. We did talk about Alabama and Arkansas, but let's talk about what's going on in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Georgia to an extent.
Okay, so Georgia, anyone who's watching this is probably familiar with Rayshard Brooks, yep. the guy who was shot by police in Atlanta, yes.
In the Wendy's parking lot?
It is probably the biggest reason I put Georgia as a deep red, because the defunding of the police, the blue flu, I think it's called, and the rioting that has resulted from it is going to just be it's going to be a big help to the Republican Party, because once again, they are the antithesis of the rioting right now, and the Democrats are not the antithesis as of right now.
Do you think the Atlanta mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, is popular right now, or do you think not?
I think popular, but not in a good way. I think she's kind of, everyone's looking at her like, what are you doing? You got to help stop this.
That's fair.
And I believe Brian Kemp has now gone into the beginning stages of bringing the National Guard in, but I'm not entirely sure on that. Okay. I have seen it in articles here and there, but I never looked completely into it. So viewers, please, I may not be right on that.
So let's move up to Virginia. Why do you think Virginia is going to be so blue? I thought that was a really interesting pick as well.
Well, 2018, we saw a complete shift from red to deep blue, and we saw that most famously with Ralph Northam, the governor.
Right.
The second he came in, he passed a bunch of anti-2A laws. Some people liked it, but a lot of the rural Virginians did not like it whatsoever, and that was probably best exemplified when there was the pro-2A march that we saw in Virginia right as the lockdown was commencing. And on top of that, the Virginian government kept on perpetually extending it for no reason whatsoever. At least other states did have their reasons, but Virginia was no reason whatsoever. However, in saying that, again, the New Yorkers, which we'll get to soon, I think they're going to start congregating to Virginia because they see it as another blue state, and they're gonna bring with it their voting habits that might keep it that way. But I could be wrong. You know, it always changes.
So yeah, let's talk about New York now then, huh? Let's do it.
All right. I'm looking forward to this one. So ever since this started, this has to be, without question, the worst response to how C-19 was handled. I don't even know where to begin. Andrew Cuomo putting the C-19 patients in nursing homes, causing the massive fatalities in the nursing homes, to barring people from going to church by welding the gates shut, but allowing the BLM protests to go on and the riots to go on without pause whatsoever. Or Bill Wilhelm Jr., better known as de Blasio, cutting $1 billion from the NYPD, and instead of addressing the insane uptick in violent crime, helping paint Black Lives Matter in front of Trump Tower. So just last month, 500,000 New Yorkers have left New York as a result of this. And even right now in New York City, there is a new Chaz there. It is known as Abolition Park.
I've heard, absolutely. How many shootings have there been recently in New York City?
I believe
a couple weeks here as the police have backed off. It's been a high number.
Yeah, it's pretty high. I believe one weekend was up to 79 shootings. I could try verifying that real quick.
Wow.
Let's see.
That's terrifying.
So New York Post. I'll verify this right now. Just today, there were two innocent bystanders got hurt in a shooting. 2 hurt in Brooklyn drive-by shooting. Boy 13 fatally shoots younger brother in game of cops and robbers. Son of slain California doctor said dad was asking for directions when he was shot. What else is there? Video shows gunfire erupt in Bronx Street following argument. 29-year-old man fatally shot on Upper West Side, and it just keeps going and going with all these different shootings. There was even one. There was even you guys watching may remember the dad walking his daughter. I believe it was in Mott Haven, and a car just drove up to the dad and shot him just for no reason whatsoever. Riley, you may have seen that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I did see that. Wow.
Yeah, and that's what happens when you get rid of your police. And what does Wilhelm Jr. do instead of addressing it? He helps paint Black Lives Matter and goes out in the protest with the rioters. And Cuomo just completely ignores it all and tries to blame his failures on Trump. So that is why New York has done this worse than any other state.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So I actually want to take a pause here, and we'll take a break. And then I want to come back and just do a little discussion here, a little Q&A about some other electoral stuff. But I think we've got a very good look at the map here so far for your predictions.
For sure.
If you don't mind. Okay. Cut. Okay, so we're back. So let me ask you something. What do you think is going to be like for most people, the people that are either default blue or default red, what do you think is going to bring them to the ballot box?
The new calls for abolishing the police.
Law and order?
Yeah, law and order. How Donald Trump is the antithesis of the rioting that's happening right now, and how the Democrats are, as of right now, perfectly fine with it, and in some states even encouraging it still to this day.
Let me ask you this. Do you see a situation in which another Chaz happens and Joe Biden stands up to them?
Given his current cognitive decline, I don't think that he'll be in a position to do so. I think that'll be more up to the vice president, whoever that may be. And as of right now, I don't see any vice president having the gall to stand up to any of these autonomous zones. Because in Seattle's Chaz, look at Mayor Jenny Durkin. The only reason she stopped it was because they came to her house. If they never came to her house, they would have just kept it going.
Right.
More shootings, more sexual assault, everything.
Demands. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, and let me ask you another thing. Because we do this weird thing where people will say the government isn't systemically bad, but also they should provide our health care or something, right? So let me ask you something. Do you think coming out of 2020 overall and going into November, people will generally just be fed up with the government overall?
Without question. And my favorite examples right now are in North Carolina and Utah. In Utah, former NFL player Burgess Owens actually won a congressional seat out there. Wow. And congrats to him for that. And in North Carolina, there's a gentleman my age by the name of Madison Cawthorn. Now, what I liked about these two guys is they were not backed by any politicians. They're not affiliated with any PACs. So they still have their principles and their morals along with them. And that's what I like about those two guys. I think I wish them all the best.
Absolutely. That's fair. Okay. Another question. Do you think that a serious number of people will actually turn out for Kanye?
It's a little late for him, but if it were earlier, they absolutely would. I mean, granted, with even with me, if Trump weren't running and Kanye did run, I'd vote for him. Because even right now, as it currently stands, he is a better alternative than Biden.
Well,
And
yeah, no, I mean you're right. I think that you're right. Some other people might not, but I think that you're right. Moving on to some other things. Speaking of Biden and some other people sort of influencing him, he's kind of a chameleon. We've talked about this. So there are 6 things here I have on a list, areas of policy where Biden and Bernie attempted to resolve their conflict, and it did not work out particularly well. Number 1, I just want to hear your thoughts. Number 1, expand government-sponsored healthcare, public option, but not Medicare for all. Are you surprised?
I'm surprised they didn't do that sooner.
Okay, fair. Actually, that's fair. Okay, number 2, the economy, closing the income gap and creating jobs.
That goes against the whole idea of equal opportunity. You're starting to drift into equal outcome once you do that. You're all about propping people up once again. It was exactly what the founding fathers didn't want. So good job, you guys.
Let's see. Climate change. No ban on fracking.
Now, I'll be honest. When it comes to fracking, I'm completely ignorant on that. I would not be able to give a good reply to that if I'm going to be honest.
That's fair. Let me put it to you like this.
Okay.
It's as invasive as having one of your internal organs removed from your body. But if you're the planet. The headline is, we should use nuclear because it's zero emission, and we can safely handle nuclear waste and nuclear energy. Again, it's radioactive, so it's got a very, very long half-life, millions of years, but if we're careful, we've done it in the past, we can do this. So that's why I say nuclear, because it's just a nasty process. You stick a drill in, the earth starts shaking, some of the crust starts falling inward. You can see parts of California starting to get shorter compared to like streetlights and stop signs because the ground is sinking. So we should be using nuclear. It's just much more efficient.
Anyway, and one thing I like about nuclear as well is that the net ratio is really high.
Right. It's like, very cheap. Yeah.
Right. With coal, the net ratio is about 87-1, and ethanol is about 0.87 or 0.25 to 1, which essentially means the amount of energy that goes into making the energy, you're not getting any positive gains out of it. Now, nuclear energy, to my knowledge, that's well over 1,000 to 1. So it takes no energy to produce the energy. And I think France, if I'm not mistaken, is entirely running on nuclear energy at the moment.
Oh yeah, that's a very, very point. Macron considers himself a progressive, and he's all about the Paris Climate Accords, but he will not back down on nuclear. And I don't think he should. Nuclear power plants don't emit carbon.
He's a smart guy for that.
Yeah, I agree with him. Speaking of that, let's see. There was another one. A strong focus on immigration, and specifically undoing President Trump's policies.
I feel like that's just a euphemism for illegal immigration and decriminalizing it. Does that sound about right?
It is. We don't want to have this conversation that, by the way, every other nation state has about immigration.
I mean, come on, we passed this already.
Yeah, no,
do it like everyone else did.
I know.
You know?
Yeah, no, I would agree. One thing I do like here, education, rethinking Obama-era policy.
Rethinking in that how it was good, how it wasn't good.
I think more like the one where it's the let's reform it. But in any case, those are just a few of the examples. I got 2 more. I got 2 final questions, and we'll conclude everything. Number 1. How important is the Supreme Court? Because Ruth Bader Ginsburg will likely step down during the presidency of whomever is elected in November. So how important is the Supreme Court?
Ginsburg, you are a superhuman. How many times have you had pancreatic cancer now? You're a superhuman. What do you do what do you do for such supreme health at your age? I doubt you see this, but please, if you do, feel free to reach out to Riley. Please tell us what you do to maintain your health, because that is just seriously. Man. Even at 24, I would kill to have health like that.
Yeah, no, seriously. So it's important, we'll say. Yeah. The Supreme
Yeah,
Court is very important, and that pick is going to be very important. That said, so what do you think? I mean, let's about the chameleon question and Joe Biden. We'll wrap up with this, but do you think Biden will be more interested in trying to assuage the establishment or trying to assuage the more revolutionary, radical, members of his party?
so it's much like we went on with Harris in another discussion we had. He's kind of established enough to appeal to the moderates, but at the same time,
Right.
he had Bernie Sanders, who is a infamous revolutionary. He's doing that to appeal to the progressives because they don't like Biden. They wanted Sanders.
That's why I
And
don't
as
think there's going to be a huge voter turnout. I think a lot of people are going to stay home, just like in 2016.
I'm reading in some places that 30% of the, I think it was 10 to 30% of the Democrat voter base was turned away after Sanders lost, if I recall right. But
That sounds about
I mean,
right.
if you want
I
that
know,
real
I
quick.
know, I know a percentage of Sanders supporters that voted for Trump just basically out of spite. I also have friends who voted for Hillary Clinton who are now thinking about voting for Trump. They're not really sure. That's such a taboo thing to say these days. You're not allowed to say thinking about voting for Trump. And I understand that sometimes he runs his mouth, and yeah, sometimes it can be like, a little much. He's definitely made it. Sometimes he, stirs the pot. That's not a secret. Obviously, he likes it.
He
Yeah,
likes to the room. That's what he does. He's
he's a
a
performer. That's what he likes.
he works the room real well.
He does. He does. It's actually quite, politically, he's a genius.
Fight about it, but that's his specialty.
I mean, politically, he's a genius in that way. I mean, he really knows how to work an audience. Like, honestly.
Seriously, he's amazing at that.
Okay, everybody. Well, I think that concludes today's episode. Until we meet again sometime, thank you for listening to The Riley Lewis Show. I always appreciate your time and your support. If you like what we're doing here, you'd like to support me in my content, you can hit that subscribe button down below. Can't miss it. You can also like this video or find the link in the description of this video, which goes to my Patreon page where you can sign up, become a member, make a donation. You can also find me on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. You've been listening to Antonio Giusto discuss the election upcoming this November in the United States.
Don't forget this map. I think it's going to be pretty spot on.
That's right. That's right. Do not forget this map. We will come back obviously later, and we'll have to do a post-mortem and see after the election how things turned out.
I look forward to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much again. There are a number of platforms to find me, a number of ways to support me. You've been listening to The Riley Lewis Show.